In this video, we're going to look at adding the LZX Diver to the Vidiot. Diver is a waveform visualizer and a complex digital ramps generator. It's capable of adding a number of modulation sources or external images to what you can already do in the Vidiot. This video will assume that you're already familiar with the basic functions of Diver and Vidiot. There are other videos on this channel that explain each module in detail. Before we start patching, we need to make sure the two units are synchronized to each other. To do this, I'm going to take the luma out from the back of the Vidiot. That's this cable here. And turn my Diver over. You've got two sync jacks and a switch. You want to make sure the switch is set to terminate, and then you can plug this into either of the two RCA jacks. Now that everything's synchronized, let's take a look at some very basic patches. I'm going to start by taking the H plus V ramp out from Diver, and I'm going to plug that into the key 2 threshold control on Vidiot. Switch key 2 to on, and you'll start to see a very typical ramp coming from the Diver. If you're not familiar with Diver, I recommend watching the 3 patches video on this module before continuing. So Diver is set to its first bank, and here we see just a very basic ramp being generated. One very basic thing we can do is take any of these oscillator 2 outputs, I'm going to go with the sine wave, and plug that into the horizontal phase control on the Diver. That's going to start to let me modulate that ramp. My second oscillator is set to be unsynchronized. I could also synchronize it for a different effect. And so what's nice here is that we're seeing the movement in our pattern being generated here by the Vidiot. And we're also seeing the same movement being applied to the Diver. I could also go into the wave input and get a slightly different result. The V-phase input can't accept fast enough signals, so you'll get an unpredictable result. But you can try it nonetheless. I'm going to go back to my H-phase input. Of course, we can adjust the amount. And now we can also start to take any of the other Diver outputs and use those in turn to modulate different parts of the Vidiot. So I'm going to take my vertical ramp output, and I'm going to plug this into the frequency modulation control on the first oscillator of my Vidiot. This starts to introduce some additional movement into that first oscillator. And I can jump through my different patterns, diamond and circle patterns. Now I can adjust my mix controls. So you can see a little bit of just what's happening with oscillator 1, having that FM control. I could also use this to trigger the sync on oscillator 1. We're just going to give a little bit of a chaotic result, but you might be into that. So now that I have my basic pattern going, I could start to play with some other options on the Diver. So I could turn scroll Y on, slow that down a little bit. It's kind of nice sometimes to get movement going up and down at the same time in a patch. And I could turn my mirroring controls on for a more symmetrical result. Maybe start to scroll in the X direction too. And now that I have this basic patch, I can start playing with my different keying options, start adjusting different color mixes, different oscillator frequency ranges. Play with inverting on my Diver. Adjust mirrors on and off. There you go. Additionally, I could get the H ramp involved by going in and inverting the key. There you go. So that's just going to give me one other option. could also put this into something like inverting a color channel, which might be a little bit more dynamic in this case. So that should give you a basic understanding of how to patch these two modules together. In the next patch, we'll look at something a little more complicated. Now that we've gone through the basics of integrating Diver with the Vidiot, let's look at a slightly more complicated patch. So the heart of this patch is going to rely on the H plus V ramp from Diver modulating one of the oscillators in the Vidiot. So I could show you here. We could start to apply some FM. Eventually in this patch though, we're going to want to sync. I'm going to mirror the X and Y on my Diver. My Diver is just set to the very first bank, so we can see the familiar diamond shape. So this is starting to sync my VCO. It's giving a pretty cool and interesting result. I'd like to be able to adjust the size and shape of this diamond. There's a little bit I can do using Diver itself with the horizontal and vertical phase, but for more flexibility, I'm going to patch it into the Luma processor. The easiest way to do this is to take that shape and go into the camera input on the back of the Vidiot. So now, if I switch my Vidiot output to view the Luma processor, I can see what this is starting to do. So now I can adjust the brightness of that diamond shape and the contrast and the detail, although that won't have a very strong effect. And of course I can start to key it in different ways, etc. So now to get the output of my Luma processor back into the sync control, I'm going to take the output from the back of the Vidiot again and plug that into my sync. So I'll go back to view. And now as I adjust my brightness controls, I'm adjusting the shape and size of that diamond. Now because the Diver H plus V out is going into the camera input, I still have that unprocessed output here available in the camera. So I could take that out, for example, to a keyer. And now this is going to give me another dimension of control. I'm going to adjust my color settings so they're not quite so uniform, so we can start to see what the keyer is doing. And switch the keyer on. And so now you can see the keyer is processing the H plus V ramp, unprocessed. The Luma processor is just affecting the sync. So this is a cool way to take any external signal, in this case the Diver, and give two separate levels of control. Now I'm going to start involving just a little bit more modulation. So I'm going to take oscillator 2 and plug that into the FM input on my first oscillator. Gives me a little bit more interactivity and a little more complexity. So now I'm going to take some outputs of the Vidiot and use those in turn to modulate the Diver. So I'm going to take the circle mix out, and we'll try that into the wave voltage control input. I'll just give a very, very little bit, just to make a little bit of a wiggly diamond. And then maybe I'll try the triangle out from my second oscillator into the horizontal phase input. There we go. So again, I want to keep these things pretty subtle. Adjust my keyer just a little bit. Okay. From here, we could unsync this oscillator to get a little bit of movement, if that's what we desire. I'm going to keep it synced for now, just so it's clear what's going on. And with this basic patch intact, we could start playing with some of our different options. So you'll see as we change the brightness, we're changing how this sync control works. Bring the frequency down. In contrast, we get a similar sort of adjustment. If I want to, I could start playing with the keyers. So if I solarize this key, we'll get a very different result. If I do a negative key, similarly different. I could start playing with different colorizer controls. And of course, I could start adjusting my Diver. So I could turn the mirrors off. I could start scrolling in different dimensions. Or I can invert the Diver. And adjust my different thresholds. and just start generally playing around. You'll notice on the edges of the diver shape, we're getting a really interesting feedback loop. This is because the H plus V output is modulating the first oscillator on the Vidiot, which in turn is influencing the circle mix, which is going back to voltage control the wave input on diver. If you take that out, you'll get a much more predictable result. If you increase the voltage control of the wave, you'll start to get really dynamic feedback. So this patch can go from fairly slow and elegant to very crazy in just a matter of a few button presses. So this is a nice example of how you can start to use the keyers and the luma processor to work with the external ramps coming from diver. In this last patch, we're going to look at using external audio inputs to drive both the Vidiot and the diver. So I have a signal coming from an external synthesizer. I've multiplied that so I can put it both into the wave input on my diver and the audio input on the back of the Vidiot. As I start sending an audio signal, you can see the little ear light blinking, which means the Vidiot's starting to get some signal. So we could take that right away and start to see the effect that's going to have. On the diver, I'll take a look at the H plus V ramp, plug that into key inversion, turn the key on. It's a good, easy way to see it. And as I start to increase the wave input, we'll start to see the result of the synthesizer. And of course, I can go very extreme on the wave input, or very low. We'll get different types of results. The bank select is set to the waveform sampling bank. I have mirror X and Y turned on. So from here, we can again take the vertical ramp from diver and use that to start to FM one of the oscillators. So now we should start to see a little bit of an audio dynamic effect on that vertical oscillator. If you want, just so we can see it a little bit more clearly, there you go. So this could be a cool effect just on its own. For now, we'll plug this back in. We can also take the H minus V ramp and use that to modulate our second oscillator. So again, if we pull that out, if I take this FM out, you can see that's just kind of bouncing them up and down, which is a cool effect. Put the V ramp back in. Plug this back into our key inversion. And now we still have the ear output available on Vidiot. This is taking the audio signal and applying an envelope follower to it, which gives us a smooth CV curve out we can paste anywhere in our patch. So I could just go directly into a color channel, which is going to give me a little extra color modulation based on the sound. I could go into a color inversion switch, which is going to invert the signal anytime the audio gets above a certain range. I could also take this back out to diver and apply it to the vertical phase or the horizontal phase. So if I turn the wave down a little bit, start to see what that's doing. I could also put the diver in a different mode to one of the preset ramps, which is going to give me a little bit of a more subtle effect. Well, let's keep it in waveform sampling mode for now. Now we have a very complex audio visualization going on. Of course, we could start to switch through the different modes on the Vidiot. Start to play with different color combinations. Different key amounts. Let's take this back into our inversion and fine-tune our oscillator ranges. So again, depending on how you set everything, you can go from very subtle audio visualizations to all-out madness pretty quickly. So that should give you some idea of how to get started patching your Diver and your Vidiot together. There's plenty more to explore, but hopefully this gives you some ideas of patches you can make. Thanks for watching, and as always, please leave any questions or requests for future videos in the comments below.